गुड इवनिंग एवरीवन एंड वेलकम टू 5 पैसा। मैं हूं कुशाल भागी और आज हमारे साथ एक वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग गेस्ट मिस्टर विश्वजीत सोनागरा। लेट मी इंट्रोड्यूस हिम। विश्वजीत फाउंडर है क्विको एंड सैंडबॉक्स के। ये एक प्लेटफॉर्म है एंड दिस प्लेटफॉर्म इज डेडिकेटेड टू सिंप्लीफाइंग टैक्स फाइलिंग एंड कंप्लायंस। अच्छा, क्विको को इंडिविजुअल्स और बिजनेसेस दोनों इनका इस्तेमाल करते हैं एंड क्विको वाज फाउंडेड इन 2015। नाउ इसके पहले लॉन्च करने से पहले विश्वजीत ने कई ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल जायंट्स के साथ काम किया है। ओके, he's worked with Fidelity Investments, Deutsche Bank and even Thomson Reuters in the US. And then 2021 के बाद he expanded his vision and he expanded his offering by introducing Sandbox. What is Sandbox? Sandbox is a full stack tax compliance API solution. इसे NBFC, banks, e-commerce platforms, fintechs सभी इनका इस्तेमाल करते हैं। Okay, so given his extensive experience, not just internationally, but even in the Indian taxation landscape, हमने ये सोचा, why not get him onto the show? Because there's no one better to help navigate our Indian taxation landscape, जो कि काफी complex है, right? So let's get started. Vishwajit, thank you very much आज हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए।
Thank you very much, Kushal, for those kind words. And it's always interesting and exciting to talk about with taxes with somebody who brings the kind of experience that you bring, and hopefully will be able to unlock value हमारे audiences के लिए. Jan, Feb, March oftentimes tax saving months कहे जाते हैं, and right after that tax season भी आ रहा है. So I think this conversation is absolutely timely, and we'll look to unlock as much value as we can.
Fabulous. And unlock value शुरुआत से ही करते हैं, एकदम basic से. Okay, so you're going to start by explaining to us, Vishwajit, ki first of all, income tax actually hota kya hai? All right. And, what are the different heads of income that are recognized by the Indian tax system? And कैसे each income head को differently treat किया जाता है? अगर आप वो पहले समझा सके, then I think that's a good way to get the show off the ground.
Absolutely. So I think मैंने कहीं पे सुना था ये, मैं multiple times बता चुका हूँ कि taxation is a cost of civilization. I really like that sentence, right? It's the only thing that we do as a community where we invest money for the good of the community, right? So I know there are a lot of conversations around taxes globally, not just India में tax rates higher होने चाहिए, कम होने चाहिए, taxes होने चाहिए, नहीं होने चाहिए, right? But I think if you use this as a moral compass, कि taxation is a cost of civilization, I think a lot of things make sense. Of course, हम हमेशा debate कर सकते हैं कि whether हमारा tax money optimal manner में use हो रहा है कि नहीं. I think with everything that's happening in US, that conversation is at the forefront. But I think taxes are important. Whether you India में there are two types of taxes: direct taxes and indirect taxes. Let me start there. Direct taxes are any tax levied on your income, right? So when you earn income, उसमें से जो आप tax pay करते हो, उसे direct taxes बोलते हैं. And indirect taxes जो इंडिया में I think हमारा audience जानता होगा उसको as a GST. GST is an example of indirect taxes, and ये usually consumption based tax है, right? When you go out in the market and buy something, उस पे जो आप tax pay करते हो वो indirect tax है. Now let's come back to income tax. India में there are 5 recognized income heads. Number 1 is salary. I think काफी self-explanatory है. Lot of us are working and we oftentimes get salary, and income tax also identifies salary as an income head. Number 2 is house property. ये भी काफी self-explanatory है. If you have rental property, right? If you own a property and you have given it out on rent, तो आप rental income earn कर रहे हो, जो भी taxable है, and hence house property is also one of the heads. काफी लोग confuse होते हैं कि अगर मैं property own करता हूं and खुद उसमें reside करता हूं, तो वो क्या मेरे income tax return पे जानी चाहिए? The answer is absolutely जानी चाहिए, but it will not go in form of an income. Oftentimes self-occupied house property पे हमने loan लिया है, तो वो loan income tax act में deductible है. Hence more often than not, that self-occupied property will go as a loss on your income tax return, right? So this is second income head. The third income head is capital gains. Now, when you sell any capital asset क्या होता है उसको पहले समझ लेते हैं. So equity stocks, right? A lot of us started doing investments into stock market. So stocks ho gaye, bonds ho gaye, mutual funds ho gaye, assets like gold, commodities. Real estate is also a capital asset. Any asset that appreciates in its value is considered a capital asset, right? So when you sell a capital asset, ये भी एक काफी गलतफहमी है, काफी लोग सोचते हैं कि when they buy somehow tax का implication आता है, but बिल्कुल नहीं. Only when you sell this capital asset, तो तब जो आपका सेल वैल्यू है बाय वैल्यू का डिफरेंस है वो कैपिटल गेन्स या कैपिटल लॉसेस गिना जाता है डिपेंडिंग ऑन वेदर यू मेक मनी और लूज मनी, राइट? सो दैट इज द थर्ड इनकम हेड. द फोर्थ इनकम हेड इज बिजनेस एंड प्रोफेशन इनकम. आई थिंक अगेन द टाइटल इज वेरी सेल्फ एक्सप्लेनेटरी. इफ यू यहाँ पे समझने का कॉन्सेप्ट है कि प्रोप्राइटरशिप बिजनेसेस, राइट? प्रोप्राइटरशिप बिजनेसेस आर सिंगल पर्सन बिजनेसेस जहां पे आपकी एंड आपके बिजनेस की आइडेंटिटी वन एंड द सेम है. It often operates on the same pan also, right? So those businesses and any incomes or losses arising out of those businesses have to be reported on your individual tax returns. Same with professions. If you are a chartered accountant, doctor, architect, then any income arising out of your profession will also go on your income tax return under the head business and profession. And the last but not the least is other income sources, right? So club कर दिया गया है जो भी income sources इनमें fall नहीं होते हैं उनको other income sources में club कर दिया गया है. Most common other income sources are dividend income because हम investor trader audience को address कर रहे हैं. Interest income, right? Savings interest, FD interest, PF, PPF interest is considered income from other sources. But also, for example, a lot of people in India are part of gig economy, right? And they get contractual payments, tuition incomes and things like that can also be considered under other income sources. So these are the 5 common income sources. We will talk about in depth कि इनका tax treatment क्या होता है and nuances around it. I think before I close, the last part of your question was कि इनके tax treatments कैसे different है, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, you have to understand incomes in India are taxed in 2 manner, slab rate and special rate, right? So slab rate, we all talk about budgets, and budget mein every year finance minister stands on the floor of parliament and she announces ke bhai kya changes aa rahe hai tax rates mein. So slab rates everybody understands. Current slab rates, we will also discuss about current slab rates, but slab rate income and special rate income is where एक स्पेशल रेट होता है जो आपने अर्न की हुई इनकम पे अप्लाई होता है. तो कैपिटल गेन्स इज अ क्लासिक एग्जांपल ऑफ स्पेशल रेट इनकम, राइट? सो दिस आर द 2 ways incomes are taxed in India.
Okay, great. I think ये एक अच्छी शुरुआत है. It lays the basis for our conversation because to all our viewers, ये conversation में we are going to talk about the comprehensive tax landscape in India. Okay, जैसे विश्वजीत ने कहा था, this is the tax filing season, so सबकी नजर taxes पे वैसे ही है. So I think this is a good opportunity to go and talk about all these various facets. And Vishwajit, अपने tax landscape में there are a few, I won't call them complications, right? But there are a few items that people struggle to understand, whether you're a first-time taxpayer or even if you've been paying taxes for some time. But again, let's start from the basics. If we were to talk about the difference between filing returns and paying your taxes, could you just explain that to us and the viewers, please?
Absolutely. So I think oftentimes people get confused, right?
Yes.
Most common confusion is कि जब हम salaried employee है तो हमारा TDS deduct होता है. हमारा employer, when the employer pays out salary, हर एक paycheck में से, which is why CTC and take home, right? Cost to company is different than take home salary, and one important part of it is TDS deduction. तो बिकॉज वो टीडीएस डिडक्ट हो रहा है एंड डिपॉजिट हो रहा है, ऑफन टाइम्स पीपल मिसकंस्ट्रू इट कि मुझे टैक्स फाइल करने की जरूरत नहीं है बिकॉज मेरा ऑलरेडी टैक्स कट चुका है, राइट? सो आई थिंक इट्स अ वेरी गुड क्वेश्चन. लेट्स अंडरस्टैंड इट, लेट्स ब्रेक इट डाउन. सो ड्यूरिंग द फाइनेंशियल ईयर, whatever incomes you earn, right, are essentially there are 2 concepts that we need to understand. एक है TDS, which is tax deducted at source, and दूसरा है advance tax, right? Now I'll help you understand why that is important. So just like हमें बजट की जरूरत है एवरी मंथ अपने एक्सपेंडिचर्स मीट करने के लिए, वैसे गवर्नमेंट को भी एवरी मंथ बजट की जरूरत है, राइट? दे नीड मनी इन ऑर्डर टू kind of sponsor all the schemes, starting from infra all the way to all the public amenities that we access. So government says that I want to earn my taxes every month or every regular interval, right? And वो दो manner में collect होते हैं, एक TDS के form में. So whenever somebody pays you an income, they have to deduct some part of it and give it to government. That is one way. And the other is you assess it yourself. कि यार मैं business profession, मेरा business है, तो in that case my customer is paying to me. I will have to calculate what my tax liability is, and I will have to deposit advance tax. साल में 4 installment होता है to income tax department, to government of India, right? So these are the two ways we pay taxes during financial year. Now filing, which happens in assessment year. So now assessment year is a year exactly followed after financial year, right? So let's take an example. 1st April 2024 to 31st March जो अभी आ रही है 2025 is a financial year 24-25. And
is the financial year 24-25, correct?
And 1st April 2025 till 31st March 2026 of next year will be the assessment year 25-26, right? So during this assessment year, we would assess all the incomes that we earn during financial year 24-25, right? We would
Understood.
gather
This
all
was
the
going to
data.
be one of my next questions any which ways, because this is the other one जहाँ चौका खा लेते हैं लोग, right? In
Absolutely.
the sense, this financial year, assessment year, आज भी समझे कल भूल जाते हैं. So what you are saying, if I can recap, is today we are ending 2025. So 24-25 is the financial year. 25 to 26 financial year is also called the assessment year for FY 24-25.
Absolutely. Right.
Okay.
So it's considered assessment year for the previous year. Right?
Yes.
So
Understood.
and you are absolutely right. Kaushal, ये आपने जो conundrum express किया वहाँ पे finance minister ने भी acknowledge किया है, and जो नया income tax bill आया है उसमें they have changed the terminology. Now of course, just like government does everything, they think they have simplified it, so they have introduced a new terminology called tax year. But I don't want to confuse our audience with it, right? However, right now, financial year 24-25 में हम लोग, and we are heading into assessment year 25-26 1st April आने पे. Now coming back to the original question, so paying taxes is something you do during the financial year in form of TDS, in form of advance tax, right? And assessing the taxes or filing your tax return is something you do during the assessment year. Everybody knows 31st July is the due date. We get tens of thousands of people who want to file in last few days, right? So everybody knows the due date. So that's called filing your income tax return. Now filing is just a kind of clerical activity, right? All you are doing is gathering all the information, reporting it in an income tax return, and letting government know that you have already paid your tax dues. Just in case there is any shortfall, then you have an opportunity to pay something called self-assessment tax, right? So self-assessment tax pay करके आप वो shortfall को plug कर सकते हो. अगर आपने ज़्यादा taxes pay किए हैं, तो आप income tax return file करके refund भी claim कर सकते हो, right? So this is the fundamental difference between paying your taxes and filing your tax returns.
But Vishvajit, I'm still a little confused, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers will also be a little confused. So I'll ask you some very basic questions, a couple of them. Does everybody has to file their returns? Who is exempt from filing their returns? So let me give you just one example, or फिर आप, you can give a holistic answer. Let's say किसी के घर में there are grandparents, right, or people that have retired. Now उनके पास तो कोई income है ही नहीं, right? Maybe from their immediate family, they are getting paid either in cash or money bank पे जमा कर देते हैं, right? In such cases, irrespective of the amount, assuming that the money has come from existing immediate family members, that they don't have their own source of income under any of the heads जो आपने पहले mention किए थे, are such people also required to file returns? Who is exempt from filing returns, right? वो थोड़ा clarity दीजिए.
That's a great question. So anybody whose income, taxable income, is below basic exemption limit is not required to file their income tax return. They can voluntarily file income tax return, but they are not mandated to file income tax return. Now,
what is that basic exemption limit today?
Absolutely, right? So if we talk about the new regime, which is, I think most people have now enrolled in new regime. So under new regime, that basic exemption is 3 lakh rupees. Under old regime, it used to be 2.5 lakh rupees, right? So anyone whose taxable income is below basic exemption is not required to file income tax return. anybody whose income is above 2.5 lakh rupees under old regime, yeah, 3 lakh under new regime, must file income tax return. There are in fact penalties or late filing fees if you either don't file it at all or you file a late return, right? Now you asked a few more questions in there. You said, what about senior citizens? So there is a special exemption in case of senior citizens. Not that they don't have to file their return, the limit, the basic exemption limit increases for them, right? So it goes to 5 lakh rupees, right? So in case of senior citizens, if their taxable income is above 5 lakh rupees, then in that case, they have to file their income tax return. Now, another question you asked, oftentimes senior citizens get help from friends and family, especially family members, right? Kids are transferring them money for in order to meet month-to-month expenses. And in that case, it's considered a gift income. Now, even if your gift income is greater than this amount that we discussed, right? So we advise in that case, although it is tax exempt, we advise them to file income, and that way you can be out of the woods, right? It's always good to file your income tax return. It has become an essential document to do so many things in India, right? If you want to access credit, right? If you are a senior citizen and you want to access credit for whatever reason, right? For example, kids ka wedding ke liye, ya children's education ke liye, ya you want to do a renovation in house and you want to access loan. Income tax return becomes a very important document in that case. If you don't file income tax return, it becomes really difficult for bank to assess whether you are credit worthy or not. So hence, अगर आप मेरी advice लो, तो I request everyone to file income tax return. It has become really easy to file income tax return. Government has great utilities to file income tax return. It's completely free. And then if you need help, there are platforms like us where you can file income tax return.
Okay, fair enough. So, अगर मैं इसको summarize करूँ, we are saying that there is a taxable limit. दो tax regime है. We'll talk about both these tax regimes. The limit is different. दोनों tax regime में. And if your taxable income is above that particular taxable income limit, then it is compulsory कि आप returns file करना ही है आपको. If in case senior citizen, जैसे हम लोग discuss कर रहे थे, especially getting money from friends, relatives, etc., that is called gift income, and that does not qualify under taxable income. So technically, आप compulsory नहीं है to file your taxes, but it is recommended as good practice. Is that the good summary of you said? Okay.
Well put.
The other question मेरे पास था on financial year and assessment year. वो आपने तो समझा दिया. You had mentioned something about tax year. You want to say it anyways? If it is something all of us, मतलब जो अपने को जानना ही पड़ेगा, तो then might as well take this opportunity. We understood that financial year is financial year. Assessment year is the year after the financial year, जहाँ आप taxes assess करते हो for the previous or the previous financial year, right? तो ये tax year अभी क्या होता है? आप कुछ बता रहे थे, तो वो भी
absolutely. So I think a lot of people were getting confused, right? And we discussed that confusion. अगर आप income tax portal पे जाते हो, the first question it will ask कि which assessment year you want to file your income tax return for, and immediately half of India would drop off and they would run to their chartered accountants कि यार ये तो first question ही मुझे समझ में नहीं आ रहा है, right? So this was acknowledged by finance minister, and I don't know if you know, but audience के लिए भी ये जानना important होगा कि recently finance minister introduced a new tax bill. She announced it in the जो budget था, उसमें announce किया गया 1st February को, and शायद 1 या 2 week के बाद वो table भी किया गया parliament में, and it's called a new income tax bill, right? And उसमें the intent of government is to simplify the tax code, because जो current tax code है वो 1961 में लिखा गया है, and as you can understand with everything उसमें काफी amendments and काफी additions किए गए हैं, जिसके कारण वो overly complicated भी है for somebody to understand. Also, it's quite jargonized. One of the jargons we discussed is financial year and assessment year, right? So what the new income tax bill proposes is ये jargons को let go किया जाए and only एक term adopt की जाए जिसको tax year बोलेंगे. So essentially जो आपका financial year था वो अब tax year हो गया, and जब आप return file करने जा रहे हो तभी भी आप कौन से tax year के लिए return file कर रहे हो वो आपको choose करना है, and hence hopefully that will make things simpler for people.
This should have been done a long time ago, but better late than never. I guess, as far as that's
Absolutely.
concerned. Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Let's move on, Vishwajit. Let's come to the heart of the matter. What are the different tax rates applicable to different types of income in India?
I think what I've done is I've prepared a small deck, so keeping it on the
दिखाइए
screen
जरूर.
would absolutely. So I'm sharing my screen. If somebody can help me focus on it, great. So let me go to the text rates, right? So I think this we already discussed, but I would, since we are on the question, I would summarize it one more time.
Please.
There are two types of incomes: slab rate incomes and special rate incomes. Like I said, capital gains are considered special rate incomes. This slide very nicely says for all the income heads that we discussed, whether they are slab rate income or special rate income, right? So let's very quickly run through it. And then we will discuss what are those slab rates. So salary income is slab rate, rental income, which is part of house property head, is also slab rate, business profession is slab rate, right? Now, capital gains are considered special income. So as you can see, long-term capital gains from stock, equity, MF ETFs is 12.5%. It's a special rate. So जो भी आपकी income है, let's say 1 lakh rupees income है, so you will simply do multiplication 12.5%. So that is
Correct.
12,500, and that becomes your tax liability, right? Short-term capital gains from stocks and MFs and ETFs is 20%. Long-term capital gains from other capital assets is 12.5%. So this was another important change that came out in last budget, that now all long-term capital gains will be taxed at 12.5%. That's another initiative by government to simplify tax code. Now, short-term capital gains from other capital assets. Now, other capital assets we discussed. Jewelry is a classic example. Indians are, gold lovers. We all have jewelry, right? So, if you end up selling jewelry or a gold bullion, right, then it will be considered other capital assets. So, in that case, short-term is slab rate. This is an exception, right? Although it is capital gains, it's taxed at slab rate. Now, profits from cryptocurrency is considered, it's taxed at 30%, right? So it's also a special rate. And then other income sources like dividend and interest is taxed at slab rate. So I hope this kind of covers most income sources that a common Indian family earns. Now let's deep dive into what are the slab rates. So before I go there, I want to quickly explain new regime and old regime, Kushal, because यहाँ पे भी काफी लोग कंफ्यूज है, राइट? ऑल्दो इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट, फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर का गोल था कि सिंप्लीफाई करना टैक्स कोड को, बट बाय इंट्रोड्यूसिंग एन ऑप्शन, ऑफन टाइम्स इट इंट्रोड्यूसेस जिसको बोलते हैं कि चॉइस ओवरलोड हो गया है, राइट? तो ओल्ड टैक्स regime essentially offered deductions but higher tax rates, right? So as you can see, up to 2.5 lakh it's exempt, 2.5 to 5 is 5%, 5 to 10 lakh is 20%, and above 10 lakh is 30%. Now these are the rates under old regime. What it offered along with it is certain deductions, and we all for almost last 7, 8, 10 years we were claiming these deductions, right? These are deductions for investing into ELSS funds, for home loan principal, PF में अगर contribution किया है, LIC insurance purchase किया है, those are all the deductions, and we'll talk about
so all your
them.
section 80C, for example, all falls
Absolutely.
under.
Now, a few years back, finance minister introduced something called tax regime. Now, goal of the tax regime was a lot of people were complaining about deductions and hardships around claiming deductions. Also, there is a lot of verification kind of burden on government also, right? You will have to go and verify all this data, whether somebody claiming deduction has actually invested or not, right? In order to simplify it for both the parties, what finance minister did was introduced a new tax regime. Now the goal was, new tax regime was to offer lower slab rates and no deductions, right? So there are no chapter 6A deductions now available under new tax regime. In exchange for that, finance minister offered lower rates, right? So as you can compare here, up to 3 lakh it is tax exempt, जो previously 2.5 lakh तक था, right? Old regime में. फिर 3 lakh to 7 lakh में it is 5%, जबकि यहाँ पे 2.5 से 5 lakh में 5% था, right? So as you can compare, overall the slab rates are lower, but what you are foregoing is the deductions. Now, of course, India is a huge country. There are tens of millions of taxpayers. One shoe cannot fit all, right? So what she also did was she kept both the regimes available to all the taxpayers, and they can choose between the regime, right? So when you are filing your income tax return, you can decide which regime you want to opt for, and basis that your taxes will be calculated, and paid to the government, and your income tax return will be filed and processed, right? So right now, these are the tax rates. I hope I was able to clarify them.
No, very clear, and thank you for that. मेरा एक simple सवाल है. For anybody who is going to file their taxes, जैसे आप बोल रहे हो अभी उनके पास एक choice है, old tax regime में जाए या new tax regime में जाए. Obviously, अगर ऐसे देखे तो wherever your tax incidence is less, आप उसी tax regime में घुसोगे, right? How does one determine that? How does a normal person who's sitting and doing a job, etc., who may not be using a CA, etc., is there any way for him or her to see कि old tax regime better होगा, new tax regime better होगा?
Absolutely. So there are a few ways to do that, right? For example, on our platform, we've built out regime comparison, right? So if you bring in and sync your
Okay.
salary with our platform, if you sync your other income sources, then the platform will immediately tell you कि कौन सा regime beneficial है, right? Income
Okay.
tax department
That's it.
also gives calculators जहाँ पे आप data डाल के determine कर सकते हो. However, in my presentation is still up, right? तो आई थिंक यहाँ पे मैंने एक इलस्ट्रेशन डाला हुआ है, एंड आई थिंक ये एग्जैक्टली आपका जो क्वेश्चन है उसको आंसर कर रहा है, राइट? सो विच टैक्स रेजिम शुड यू सिलेक्ट, राइट? सो यहाँ पे व्हाट वी हैव डन इज कि अगर आपका इनकम ये ब्रैकेट में फॉल करता है तो आपको कितने डिडक्शंस क्लेम करने पड़ेंगे. The center column, the second column is amount of deductions you will have to claim, right, in order to be at par with the new regime, right? So oftentimes people are moving from old regime to new regime, and they have this question कि यार मैं already deduction claim कर रहा था, तो will I have to forgo those deductions? And oftentimes their question is कि मेरे लिए new regime better होगी कि नहीं होगी. So I think this table explains. So let's walk through it very quickly. So अगर आपका income,
pick up one line and explain it.
Absolutely. So अगर आपका income up to 5 lakh है, तो both new regime and old regime दोनों में nil tax है. Now while we saw कि 2.5 lakh तक की basic exemption है, there is a concept of tax rebate, and वो tax rebate old regime में up to 5 lakh तक मिलती है, right? So which means you don't have to claim any deductions up to 5 lakh income में to be at par with the new regime. उस केस में आपकी tax liability same रहेगी, right? But as soon as your income goes above that tax rebate का limit, then you have to start claiming deductions. So अगर आपकी income 6 lakh है, अगर आप old regime में 50,000 rupees के deduction claim करते हो, तभी आपका tax liability compared to new tax regime equal रहेगा, right? Zero रहेगा. अगर आपकी income 7 lakh है, तो you will have to claim 1,50,000 rupees के deductions for your tax liability to be same as new regime, right? And so forth, so on. So let's say 1,50,000 तक तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, because we all know ATC deductions, it's up to 1,50,000 rupees का limit, right? Now how does someone claim more than 1.5 lakh का deduction, right? तो यहाँ पे apart from ATC या Chapter 6A के deductions, there are few other deductions, right? So ATC is 1.5 lakh, but then ATD, which is medical insurance, is another additional 25,000 rupees. If you are senior citizen, then it also goes to 50,000 rupees. Right? There are deductions available under ATCCD, 1B and ATCCD 2, जो कि NPS के लिए available है, जो कि over and above ATC के deductions मिलते हैं, जिसका amount है 50,000 rupees, right? So अगर employer ने contribute किया है या employee ने contribute किया है towards NPS over and above 1.5 lakh, then in that case they can claim additional 50,000 का benefit. Now if you aggregate all these deductions, ज्यादा से ज्यादा आप 2.5 लाख तक जा पाओगे ना. उससे ज्यादा डिडक्शंस कैसे क्लेम करने? तो वन एग्जांपल वाज कि ओल्ड रेजिम के अंदर हाउस प्रॉपर्टी पे अगर आपने लोन लिया हुआ है एंड उस पे आप इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट कर रहे हो, तो वो भी आपको डिडक्शन मिल रहा था आपके टैक्सेबल इनकम पे. तो primarily what we see today in practice is people who have exhausted all the Chapter 6A deduction, plus people who are owning property and have home loans on it, are the only people who are advantageous to go in for old regime. Otherwise, most people will find new regime beneficial. And ये एक इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट ने डेटा रिलीज किया था लास्ट ईयर, कुशल, जहां पे उन्होंने बोला था कि more than 75% of taxpayers लास्ट जो टैक्स फाइलिंग सीजन था उसमें more than 75% taxpayers ended up opting for new regime, right?
Oh, already.
Yes, already. And
Okay.
I think इस साल का income tax department का estimate है कि that number will go, also if you know budget में there was a tax rebate का जो threshold था जो पहले earlier 7 lakh rupees था वो increase करके 12 lakh rupees किया गया under new regime. I think income tax department is expecting that most people will move to new tax regime, and in our opinion old tax regime will be discontinued in next couple of financial years.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that agar, because new tax regime also abhi recently to introduce kiya gaya, and 75% if they've already moved, so I think at the end we'll have one tax regime only in the near future.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, great. Before we move on to stock market investments, because everyone is very interested in understanding how their investments are taxed, let's talk about the tax saving month, which is the month of March. वैसे बोलते हैं that you should do your tax saving throughout the year, right? But
Absolutely.
you know that Vishvajit वैसे होता नहीं है. All of us are last minute, whether it is for Section 80C, whether it is for filing returns, or whether it is for anything in life, right? हमारा सब last minute ही काम होता है. But is there any strategies you recommend if somebody is still on the old tax regime? What are the investments कि वो करे last minute in the month of March? What is your view on that? And then we'll move on to the next
You
chapter.
touched upon a very good point, Kushal. I've been working in finance for so many years, and it has never made sense to make an investment with anything other than your financial goals in mind, right? So if you do it from tax point of view, while you are gaining some tax savings, you are losing a lot on the returns on investments, right? Oftentimes tax saving schemes are inefficient, ineffective. They also don't align with your financial goals, right? But I think hence it's strictly advised consult your chartered accountant. Don't just because workplace pay everybody's talking about ELSS mutual funds. Don't go invest in ELSS mutual funds, right? Ask whether it is the right financial instrument. It aligns with your financial goals or not. Now that being said, it's also very easy, right? It's templatized. If you do certain things in Jan, Feb, March, because there were deductions available under Chapter 6A, you would end up saving some taxes, right? And oftentimes, hence, people were becoming unifocused. कि मेरे को सिर्फ tax बचाना है. I don't mind if ELSS funds में 3 साल का lock-in period है, right? However, that behavior is changing, Kushal. Like I said, because new regime में a lot of these deductions go away. We are seeing behavior change. We are seeing people are talking about financial goals, their personal goals. They are talking about short-term horizon, medium-term horizon, long-term horizon. They are talking about their risk tolerance, and basis that they are deciding to invest, right? And I think that's a positive change. However, what are the avenues available to you between both new regime and old regime in this 3 months? Let's discuss those out, because one shoe does not fit all. Like we discussed, certain cases.
नहीं, absolutely. बता देते हैं, and then we can. Please
absolutely.
go ahead.
So, if you are, because more than 75% people are under new regime, so we'll focus on new regime first, and then we'll go to old regime. So, if you have already opted for new regime, then very few deductions are available to you. One deduction that is still available to you is employer's contribution to NPS, right? So if your employer is not already contributing to your NPS, or employer has offered NPS but you are not enrolled into NPS because it's a voluntary scheme, right? In that case, I would strictly suggest you take advantage of an NPS. It's a great scheme. It's market-linked returns, right? So that is one way to go about it. That deduction is still available under new regime. Now, the other avenues available to you is, something called tax gain harvesting, जो investors के case में काफी commonly applicable होता है. I know last few weeks and months में markets थोड़े volatile है and थोड़ा correction है. But otherwise, if you have been a long-term investor, then LTCG long-term capital gains है जो equity shares या mutual funds में, उस पे income tax department 1.25 lakh तक exemption दे रही है, right? So what you could do is something called tax gain harvesting. If you harvest your unrealized gains by selling off or liquidating those positions, by realizing gains up to 1.25 lakh. Remember 1.25 lakh से ज़्यादा capital gains है तो वो taxable है, but up to
I suggest
1.25.
विश्वजीत, sorry to cut you off,
Yes,
इसका अगर आप एक एग्जाम्पल के साथ illustrate कर सकते हो, just small numbers, then viewers might be able to connect more with them.
वैसे आपने अपने पोर्टफोलियो में अभी काफी IPOs गए, and a lot of youngsters, millennials and Gen Z participated in IPOs, right? And let's say you have some of these IPOs in your portfolio, right? You are still holding these shares. Let's say you have now held them for more than a year. In case of equity stocks, if you hold them for more than a year, they are considered long term, right? Now let's imagine कि आपके पोर्टफोलियो में 1.25 lakh rupees के unrealized gains है, right? So that means the difference between your invested value and current value is 1.25 lakh rupees, right? Positive 1.25 lakh. Now what you could do is you can sell off these shares and realize those gains. And because up to 1.25 lakh rupees ke capital gains are completely exempt, under section 112A, you have to pay zero tax on it. Otherwise, there is a 12.5% tax, right? So
Correct.
you immediately end up saving, 1,25,000 pay 12.5%, whatever that number is, right? So it's definitely somewhere around 14 to 15,000 rupees, right? So you immediately end up saving that kind of money. It's not small money, right? For an investor with a medium-sized portfolio. So this is one thing you can do. Now, what if your capital gains are more than 2 lakh? In that case, you still get exemption up to 1.25 lakh, and anything over and above 1.25 lakh is taxable. So in that case, the remaining 75,000 is taxable at 12.5%, right? Now, the second question that people ask me, hey, I'm invested in this stock. I want to remain long-term invested, right? Nothing is, limiting you from acquiring those positions back, right? So that way, you have kind of harvested tax-free gains, and then you still have the same scrip in your portfolio, right? So that's something very commonsensical, but oftentimes most investors, traders don't take advantage of. Now, similarly, there is another concept called tax loss harvesting, right? Yahan pe you do exactly opposite. What does this mean? Now you have some realized gains, let's say for whatever reason, for portfolio rebalancing, or for whatever reason you had liquidated some position and you have realized gains in your P&L, and you will have to pay taxes on it. Now what if you have unrealized losses in your portfolio? What you could do is, just like tax gain harvesting, when you realize the gains, here what you can do is realize the losses and then take advantage of the loss adjustment, right? So I'll give example again. Let's say आपके 3 lakh के long term gains थे, and आपके ही portfolio में आपके पास 2 lakh के unrealized losses थे, right? So these were scripts you were still holding, and because the market में जो अभी situation चल रहा है उसके कारण they are in red, right? In that case, what you could do is either you can hold them, keep holding them, and pay capital gains tax on your gains, right? So 3 lakh pay 12.5% is 36,500 rupees or whatever, right? Or you can liquidate those positions, those losses that you are holding in your portfolio, and set them off against your capital gains, right? So in this case, we said 2 lakh rupees ke losses hai and 3 lakh rupees ke gain hai. So now taxable capital gains is only 1 lakh rupees. And like we discussed just now, 12 up to 1.25 lakh is completely tax exempt. So what you did is you converted your entire capital gains tax free, right? So this is called tax loss harvesting. So these are the two things, oftentimes investors look upon, or overlook would be the right way to say it. Overlook, but can be really beneficial for investor community, right? So you can go, contact your chartered accountant and talk about it. You can use platforms also. For example, if you come onto Quicko, we help people because you can connect your 5paisa account and we'll analyze all this for you, and then we will suggest you what you need to do, right?
मैं वही पूछने वाला था. Can this be done on Quicko? Okay.
Absolutely. Now, this is a power of technology, right? Earlier, these kind of advisories were only available to HNIs, right? You have to have a very large portfolio to go and ask someone these complicated questions. They'll have to sift through your trades. They'll have to sift through your P&L and then tell you whether it is advisable for you or not. Now, what we are able to do is because 5paisa is technology-enabled broker, because we are a technology platform, what we were able to do is we can read all the trades given your consent, and then we can, using our algorithms, analyze this in seconds and present to you on screen, right? And then if you still need help, we always have an advisory. We have an advisory model called Meet, and you can talk to chartered accountants still, or you can download a report and go to your chartered accountant and ask them to help you execute it, right? Now, I think ये तो new tax regime की बात हुई. There are these avenues. Again, I'll recap. NPS, if you are not taking advantage, there's additional deduction available. Tax gain harvesting and tax loss harvesting are the three ways you can save taxes under new tax regime, right? Now let's talk about old tax regime. Very few people are still under old tax regime, but if you are under old tax regime, then these are the months, like you were saying, tax savings months. Oftentimes, a lot of people also call it catch-up contribution months, right? So where people make investments into tax saving schemes. What are the most favorite schemes? ELSS funds are most popular. A lot of people invest in ELSS funds. They are also equity linked, so they give market returns. Indian markets have been doing reasonably well over the last 25, 30 years, right? So it's a great way to kind of save taxes, but at the same time, earn market returns. However, let me advise you, I think you should also compare ELSS funds ke returns against other funds also, right? And then make an educated decision whether that tax saving is actually worth it or not, right? The other common area where people make catch-up contributions is something like PPF, right? If you are a non-government employee, there is a scheme called Public Provident Fund, right? Where you can invest money up to 1.5 lakh every year, and it is completely tax exempt, or it's deductible under Section 80C. It also earns you fixed returns, right? Now, it's debatable whether it beats inflation or not, right? But it gives you fixed returns. So that is another popular scheme. FD, fixed deposits. Indians love FDs and gold, right? So FD is another thing that we see people kind of making contributions to. But remember, again, FDs come with lock-in periods and things like that, and especially tax-saving FDs have lock-in periods. So you have to keep those things in mind. I think medical insurance, if you don't have adequate medical insurance, I don't think just for tax saving you should have adequate health insurance. I think COVID taught all of us that having health insurance is very important, right? So that is another area. By buying a health insurance, by buying a term insurance, right, you can also achieve that kind of insurance goal or financial goal, but at the same time save taxes. So these are few avenues available to people.
Very good. Okay. Vishwajit, let's move on to stock market investments, right? उनके बारे में बात करते हैं. And firstly, आप बताएं कि income from equity shares, right? How is that taxed? और फिर उसके बाद जाके देखते हैं mutual fund, F&O, etc. वो मैं आता हूँ वहाँ पे. But let's just start with income from equity shares.
So I think this would be again a good time if you can bring up the slides on the screen. While I'll try to explain it as well as I do, but I think having it on screen will help people read it along with me, right? So how is stock market income tax, right? So we already discussed this in bits and pieces, but I think it would be good idea to recap it, right? So we discussed that if you sell any capital assets, any profits arising out of it is considered capital gains, right? And profits from delivery-based trades are considered capital gains, and the tax rate depends on type of asset and whether the gains are long-term or short-term, right? Now, let me explain to you, de-jargonize all these things for you. So what is long-term and short-term? We discussed that if you hold equity shares in your demat account for more than 365 days, more than 12 months, then it's considered long-term. If you hold it for less than 12 months, then in that case, it's considered short-term. Now, what do we mean when we say type of asset, right? So here we are talking about equity trades. Then we know when we talk about stocks, we know this is equity asset class. But sometimes people have mutual funds, right? And mutual funds come in all flavors. You could have a debt mutual fund. Or a lot of retail investors are now also participating in bond and debentures market, right? Now there are retail bond trading platforms, right? So in that case, asset class, which is equity or debt, also makes a difference in terms of what your tax rate would be. So we'll also discuss what those tax rates for different asset classes are. So whenever we talk about capital gains, you have to think about three things. You have to think about holding period. You have to think about whether it is long term and short term. So holding period is the first thing. The second thing you have to think about is what is the asset class, and the third thing you need to think about is what is the asset type, right? So sometimes tax rate also varies between different asset types. I think crypto is a classic example of it, right? There's a very different unique tax rate in case of crypto. Now I think यहाँ पे we have listed down most common financial instruments or asset types that people invest in and what are the tax rates for it. Shall we go through it, Kushal?
Yeah, please. Because इसके बाद
Awesome.
I was going to come to mutual funds, FNO, listed, unlisted, IPO, pre-IPO. तो अगर आपके साथ सब है एक screen पे तो then that's fabulous.
Absolutely, right? So let's go through one by one. So listed equity, listed stocks and equity MFs, ETFs. So if you hold them for more than 12 months, it's considered long term. Long term ke rates are 12.5% and short term ke rates are 20%. Now, if you have unlisted shares, right, these are everybody is an entrepreneur, right? There's tremendous energy in young India, and a lot of people are starting up businesses. So, for example, if you're a founder like me, my company is unlisted. It's not listed on stock exchange yet. Then, if I sell the shares, then those are called unlisted shares, right? So, in that case, the holding period is 24 months. If I hold it for more than 24 months, it's considered long term, and long term rates are 12.5%. If I hold it for less than 24 months, then it's short term and the tax rates are slab rates. A lot of people also started investing in foreign shares. Last few years, we have seen increasing number of customers coming in with foreign shares for two reasons. Number one, a lot of people working for multinational corporations get ESOPs and RSUs from their employers who are based outside of India. And number two, is now it's easier to make investments into, for example, Gift IFSC is a classic example, but then there are also a lot of brokerages, including 5paisa, who now allow Indian investors to invest into foreign stocks. And FANG stocks have been very popular over past few years, right? So if you hold them for more than 24 months, they are considered long-term. Again, tax rate is 12.5%. And if you hold them for less than 24 months, then slab rate. Now, debt MFs and ETFs. What is a debt MF versus equity MF, right? So if the asset allocation, if more than 65% is in equity for any given mutual fund, it's considered an equity mutual fund. And if it is more than 65% in debt, then it is considered a debt mutual fund, right? So we oftentimes talk about hybrid funds and things like that, right? So hybrid funds ke case mein, you will have to know what is the asset allocation, equity versus debt, right? So if you have debt mutual funds,
because that's actually a little complicated cheese now it's become, especially in hybrid funds. क्योंकि ऐसी कोई categories है जैसे balanced advantage or conservative hybrid funds, जहाँ some of them are taxed as equities, some are taxed as debt. तो मतलब आप कह रहे हैं कि अंदर झांक के देखना पड़ेगा actually कि composition क्या है before investing in that product.
Absolutely. And as you can see, the tax rate ka difference, right? So, for example, equity MFs are taxed at 12.5% long term ke case mein. Usme also 1.25 lakh ka tax exemption available hai. However, debt MF ETFs are taxed at slab rate. And let's say if you are if you are earning more than 15 lakh, then there is a 30% slab rate on it, right? So it's absolutely essential for you to make sure that the financial instrument that you are investing in is tax efficient also, right? एक common misconception or common oversight जो मैंने देखा है कुशल is everybody logs into their broker and they look at their net realized P&L and this is primarily pre-tax returns, right? And not enough people are considering taxation and post-tax returns, right? हम भी startup world में oftentimes EBITDA की बात करते हैं. Everybody looks at EBITDA, nobody looks at profit after tax or PAT, right? So same way as an investor, you should look at post-tax returns and not pre-tax returns, because oftentimes tax can be a huge difference, right? It might convert a very high-performing asset where you earn 13-14%, returns into something like an FD if you don't pay attention to it.
Right? Very good.
Absolutely. So government bonds are very popular, and that case, if you hold them for more than 12 months in long term, 12.5%, in short term, it's slab rate. I would now go to, for example, ETFs. Right? A lot of people in India, ETFs are popular. They are becoming increasingly popular. But oftentimes people look at ETF as some exotic right instrument. While ETF is traded like a stock, but it's taxed like a mutual fund, right? So in case of ETF, you again have to look at the composition. If it's debt ETF, then it's taxed just like debt MF, and if it's equity ETF, then it's taxed just like an equity MF, right? So those tax rates are also communicated here. Now, let's. I think
they'll put the slide back up. Maybe there was some internet connectivity issues, so we'll get that back up, and it's back up again. Continue,
awesome.
Please.
Cool. You are able to follow me, right?
Yes, please.
Awesome. Cool. So I think this explains what are the different tax rates. Now let's go to hybrid funds. I think you mentioned it. We have a slide, so might as well go through it. So, like we discussed, if the fund with debt exposure of greater than 65%, then it will be considered a debt mutual fund, right? And in that case, it's considered deemed to be STCG. Now, these are the kind of nuances that confuses people. But I think the important thing to keep in mind is holding period does not matter, and the tax rate will be slab rate if it is a debt MF, right? Now, if it is an equity MF, then the holding period comes into picture. So if you hold it for more than 1 year, it is 12.5%. If it's less than 1 year, then it will be 20%.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, you were talking about balance advantage funds, right? There are certain funds where asset allocation keeps changing, right? So if it is between 35 and 65%, तो यहाँ पे थोड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है कि यहाँ पे लॉन्ग टर्म होल्डिंग पीरियड 2 years कंसिडर होगा, एंड अगर लॉन्ग टर्म है तो 12.5% रेट लगेगा, जो कि इक्विटी एमएफ का रेट है, एंड अगर शॉर्ट टर्म है तो स्लैब रेट लगेगा, जो कि डेट एमएफ का रेट है, राइट? सो यहाँ पे थोड़ा ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा आपको, बिकॉज यहाँ पे रेट्स थोड़े क्रिस क्रॉस हो रहे हैं, राइट? सो दिस इज द टैक्स ट्रीटमेंट ऑफ हाइब्रिड फंड्स. Now, I think F&O intraday is something as a financial instrument itself is little difficult to understand for retail investor. However, we have seen a lot of people participate into F&O intraday. We've seen SEBI also coming and trying to curb F&O intraday. But since a lot of people trade in F&O and intraday, let's just talk about the taxation for the same. Now, unlike capital assets, F&O and intraday, if you do trading in F&O and intraday, and if you incur profits or losses, these are considered business profession income and not capital gains income, right? Because यहाँ पे you are not investing for long-term capital appreciation, right? You are investing to take short-term advantages of, people do arbitrages. There are, macro and microeconomic situations. There is geopolitical, something or the other, where you are looking to kind of go in and out of market and take advantage of price fluctuations. So which is why it's not considered capital gains and it's considered a business profession income, right? So this in this case, if you are doing F&O intraday trading, your profits will be clubbed along with all other slab rate incomes like salary income or house property income, and it will be taxed at slab rates. Now, what you could do, because it's a business profession income, is you can claim expenses, right? What kind of expenses can you claim? Even in case of capital gains, you can claim transfer related expenses, right? So if you paid broking fee, then you can claim it. There are also a lot of different kind of taxes that get paid on capital market transaction. There is exchange turnover fees. There is IGST or CGST that you pay to your broker for providing services, right? So all those you can claim as expenses both on capital gains and business profession income. However, because F&O and intraday is business profession, you can claim other expenses, जिसको हम बोलते हैं indirect expenses, right? The earlier one that we talked about are direct expenses. They are directly related to your activity, trading activity. However, you can also claim indirect expenses like, let's say आपने office लिया है rent पे, जहाँ से आप trading कर रहे हो, तो you can also claim rent as an expense. You can claim utility bills, light bills, internet bills as an expense. If you hired an office boy, then his salary can be claimed as an expense, right? So all the indirect expenses become available for you to reduce your. So यहाँ पे मैंने एक example list किया है कि Rahul is a salaried individual and does trading as well. And Rahul के income sources ये है कि salary 13 lakh है, LTCG from listed stock 4 lakh है, STCG from listed stock 3 lakh है, and F&O का प्रॉफिट 2 लाख है. तो इस केस में आई थिंक राहुल की टैक्स लायबिलिटी न्यू रिजीम में क्या होगी उसका इलस्ट्रेशन है. लेट्स लुक एट इट. आई थिंक इट्स जस्ट वन एग्जांपल बट इट विल क्लियर द कांसेप्ट्स फॉर
वेरी गुड. Great.
So let's say
Viewers will appreciate.
हमने डिस्कस किया कि सैलरी 13 लाख है. नाउ रिमेंबर सैलरी पे स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन मिलता है जो कि अभी 75,000 रुपीस पे स्टैंड करता है. So your actual taxable salary will be 12 lakh 25,000 rupees. 13 lakh minus 75,000 equals to 12 lakh 25,000. Now FNO का profit 2 lakh rupees था. Now because we said FNO is also slab rate income, it gets clubbed with other slab rate incomes. So your total income taxable at slab rate is 14 lakh 25,000 rupees. एंड जो हमने अर्लियर स्लैब्स देखे उसके बेसिस पे आपका टैक्स लायबिलिटी होगा 1,25,000 रुपीस, राइट? नाउ आपके शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल गेन्स, राहुल के शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल गेन्स इन दिस केस वर 3 लाख रुपीस एंड दे आर टैक्स्ड एट 20%, सो द टैक्स लायबिलिटी is 60,000 rupees. Long term capital gains from stocks were 4 lakh rupees. Remember we talked about LTCG exemption of 1.25 lakh. So let's take that exemption, and hence your Rahul's taxable LTCG is 12.5% rate पे taxable is 2,75,000 rupees, which is 4 lakh minus 1.25 lakh. Now 2.75 पे 12.5% tax is 36 or 34,375, right? So now your total tax liability is 2,19,375. इस पे आपको एडिशनल 4% एजुकेशन सेस एंड हायर एजुकेशन सेस एंड सरचार्ज ऐड करना पड़ेगा. So the total tax liability is 2,28,150 rupees. So this would be the tax situation for Rahul. And we went through, understanding how capital gains are taxed, and then we also discussed how FNO incomes, intraday incomes are taxed. And now we've also looked at how to club them with other income sources and calculate your tax liability.
नहीं, वो बहुत हेल्पफुल था यार विश्वजीत. थैंक यू वेरी मच. आई एम श्योर व्यूअर्स काफी इंटरेस्ट ले रहे होंगे इसमें. वी आर कमिंग टुवर्ड्स द एंड ऑफ द शो, बट couple of questions more, Vishvajit, I have for you. And एक वापस थोड़ा conceptual questions में मैं घुस जाने वाला हूँ, which is just explain to us कि losses को set off और carry forward कैसे करते हैं. Talk to us about what the game around that is.
Absolutely. So again, if you can refer to my screen now, the reason some of these things are good to be on screen because there are multiple variables and multiple dimensions. So if you pay attention, you will be able to understand. We'll also end up sharing this pitch deck, so don't worry about it, right? You can refer to it later as well. So now losses are inevitable part of trading and investing, right, Kushal? It's part of taking risk. Where investors go and back businesses and founders and teams and management or the thesis that they believe in. Sometimes it goes your way, sometimes it goes the other way, right? So losses are inevitable part, and income tax department recognizes it and hence gives you some benefits when you incur losses. Now, what are these benefits? You can set off these losses against other taxable income, hence reduce your taxable income, so you have to pay less taxes, right? And let's understand some rules around it. So intraday losses थोड़े peculiar है because ये speculative trading activity गिनी जाती है, right? In case of FNO, you may still end up taking a delivery, but in case of intraday, you are never taking a delivery. So which is why it's considered speculative. It's highly leveraged, right? So intraday के losses है वो सिर्फ intraday के profits के सामने set off किए जा सकते हैं current year के. Now you may ask के मेरे losses है तो मेरा profit कैसे हो सकता है? तो इंडिया फॉलोज अकाउंट लेवल का P&L, राइट? सो लेट्स से एक डीमेट अकाउंट में आपके प्रॉफिट्स हैं, दूसरे डीमेट अकाउंट में आपके लॉसेस हैं, तो आप उनको सेट ऑफ कर सकते हो. नाउ व्हाट इफ यू डोंट हैव प्रॉफिट्स एंड यू ओनली हैव लॉसेस? in that case, what you could do is carry forward these losses, and you can carry them forward for 4 years. Now what is carry forward losses? By filing income tax return and reporting your losses of current year, you are allowed to carry them forward into future years, and then future years में अगर आपके profits है तो उसके सामने आप उसको set off कर सकते हैं, right? So this is intraday losses. Now FNO के losses are considered non-speculative business losses, right? Because I said, you can take delivery in case of futures contract, right? So now इसका treatment थोड़ा different है. FNO के losses any other slab rate income के सामने set off किए जा सकते हैं except salary, right? So what are other slab? जैसे आपका rental income है and आपके FNO के losses है, तो you can set up your FNO losses against your rental income. Or if you have other incomes like dividend from your investment, you can also set off against your dividend incomes, right? Let's reduce your tax liability. And इसको आप 8 साल तक carry forward कर सकते हो. Now, long-term capital loss can be set off. Capital losses थोड़े again special है because they can only be set off against other capital gains. ये किसी और income hit के सामने set off नहीं हो सकता है. So long-term capital loss you can set off against long-term capital gains. Again, you can carry them forward for 8 years. While short-term capital loss, you can set them off against both short-term gains and long-term gains, and you can also carry them forward for up to 8 years. So this is the treatment of losses under Income Tax Act.
Okay, thank you. This table was काफी helpful था. मेरे साइड से one last question. I think we're getting a lot of questions on the chat also, but I think आपका team जो है वो काफी efficiently answer कर रहे हैं. So we'll keep that aside. But मेरे साइड से one last question. शुरू में आपने बताया था advance tax के बारे में, right? तो एक जरा क्लैरिफाई कर दीजिएगा कि एडवांस टैक्स किसको भरना है, what are the due dates, are there any penalties for if you don't file advance tax etc. एक उसको जरा थोड़ा रैप अप कर देते, किसको फाइल करना है एडवांस टैक्स? That's the first question.
I think that's a good place to end this conversation at, right? Because हम लोग 5th March को connect हो रहे हैं. The next advance tax due date is 15th March. It is the last installment, right? So I think it's a good time to discuss this topic. Now, advance tax, like I said, in case of salary, TDS deduct हो रहा है. काफी लोगों को ये भी misconception है कि मेरा salary है, hence मेरे को advance tax नहीं pay करना है. Sorry, if you have salary, but along with it, if you are investing in stock markets and you have capital gains, and अगर आपका annual tax liability, total annual tax liability 10,000 रुपए से ज्यादा है, तो आपको एडवांस टैक्स एप्लीकेबल हो जाता है, राइट? एंड एडवांस टैक्स 4 इंस्टॉलमेंट्स में पे करना होता है. 15th of June इज द फर्स्ट इंस्टॉलमेंट, तब तक आपको 15% करना होता है. देन 15th of September, 15th of December एंड 15th of March, राइट? सो 15 जून तक 15%, 15th of September तक आपको 45%, 15th of December तक आपको 75%, and 15th of March तक आपको 100% of your tax liability गवर्नमेंट के पास डिपॉजिट करना होता है. Now, what if you don't pay your advance tax? In that case, there is a simple interest penalty of 1% per month, right? So जो भी आपका outstanding liability है, उस पे गवर्नमेंट 1% interest charge करेगी. Now, what I've seen is a lot of investors come and say, sir, इतना तो हम मार्केट में बना देंगे, हमें 1% interest penalty, हम वो कैपिटल रखना चाहते हैं हमारे पास, हम मार्केट में इन्वेस्ट करेंगे and 1% तो हम आराम से कमा लेंगे, right? Now the problem with that is an odd year like this one, right? कि जहाँ पे end of year पे काफी uncertainty है, global uncertainty, markets have corrected, right? And oftentimes you end up in losses. So it's a double whammy. आपको अब interest penalty भी pay करना है, and at the other end आपका capital भी depreciate हुआ है या erode हुआ है. So what I would suggest is it's a good healthy practice to calculate and pay your advance taxes. Now, I do get it. Okay? It's sometimes overwhelming for people, right? We want to live our lives. We want to, excel at upskilling ourselves and, growing our businesses. We don't want to be bothered by taxes all the time, right?
Correct.
And that is an absolutely valid argument, which is where, if you pay a little more attention to your personal finances, I think you can find a lot of savings there also. And I learned when I was young that penny saved is penny earned, right? So आप मार्केट में इतना भागते हो, इतना मेहनत करते हो, but sometimes you leave money on table for tax man, right? So I would say just spend a little bit of time every quarter on your personal finances, and you will find, if not anything else, you will find you will be able to find your personal situation, personal financial situation. You will be able to understand your budget, whether your outgoes and your incomes match or not, whether you need to make any lifestyle adjustments or not, whether you want to align better towards your financial goals or not, right? So advance tax के 4 installment and the last installment is upcoming 15th of March. यहाँ पे आपको आपकी 100% tax liability गवर्नमेंट के साथ डिपॉजिट करनी है.
Okay. Any final thoughts? Any final tips जो आप tax payers के लिए, अभी ये tax season चल रहा है, you want to leave them with? Final words from you, Vishvajit.
Absolutely. I think why I'm an engineer and why am I solving taxes, right? Because oftentimes it's counterintuitive. Okay, why do engineers solve taxes, or why are we as an engineer solving taxes? I got interested into it from personal finance point of view, right? I love understanding personal finance. I think it helps me also shape my life. Apart from, as a professional learning new skills, it's also very important to, have a really good understanding of money, where it goes, where it comes from, etc. So that's how I have been building Quicko as a text platform. But what I would suggest is everyone take interest in their personal finances, right? I get it. हमारे primary education में money and money management पे इतना emphasis नहीं दिया जाता है, and oftentimes it's a reality check once we get our first paycheck, and we spend it on loved ones, but then the next paycheck and we are not able to control our expenses, right? So one thing I would recommend everyone is to focus on your personal finances. And what I have learned is taxes is a great way to do that, right? Because जब आप आपके इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न फाइल कर रहे हो, वो एक फोर्स्ड इवेंट है, एंड लाइक यू सेड कि इंडिया में सब कुछ हमें बाय फोर्स करना है, हमें वॉलंटरीली कुछ भी नहीं करना है, राइट? हमें लास्ट डे पे इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न फाइल करना है, हमें जब पेनल्टी का थ्रेट दिया जाए तभी हमें एडवांस टैक्स पे करना है, राइट? सो income tax is a good way to, if you are filing your income tax return yourself, you will understand all your income sources. वो जो डीमैट अकाउंट जो आपने कभी ओपन नहीं किया है साल में, बिकॉज वो रेड में था, आपको ओपन करना पड़ेगा, आपको उसको इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न में रिपोर्ट करना पड़ेगा, राइट? सो इट्स अ गुड वे टू काइंड ऑफ कम फेस टू फेस विथ योर पर्सनल फाइनेंसेस. एंड I would suggest everyone to take little more interest into their taxes. And there are now platforms available like Quicko, where you can take interest into your taxes, right? So we have built the platform in a way जहाँ पे ये जो हमने conversation किया वो हमारे screens पे दिखता है, हमारे interfaces पे दिखता है, जहाँ पे we help you understand what your profits and losses are from different investment activity. We help you understand what your money inflows and outflows are, and helps make you a better, kind of a better at money, or good with money, right? So I would suggest that everybody takes advantage of it.
Fabulous. Quicko is a website. Is there an app? How do people access Quicko?
Absolutely. So we are available on all platforms. So we are available on web. You can visit us on quicko.com, right? We also have, a really good app called Glide. So if you on App Store or Play Store, if you search Glide, GLYDE,
GLYDE. Okay.
GLYDE, because for us, Texas is like gliding. It's that easy. So we call it Glide. Okay. So you can download it from a Play Store or App Store. And what we also do, Kushal, is we partner up with great platforms like 5paisa, right? Platforms that have similar value system, where we want to make sure that people invest and trade because they want to be more financially independent and build wealth, right? So we partner with those kind of platforms and build integrations and journeys so that you can do taxes easily. So that's again another way we are accessible. So if you go to 5paisa mobile app or 5paisa web app, and if you are looking to do your taxes, you will find Quicko's CTAs there, call to actions, by clicking on which you'll be able to come onto Quicko's platform and do your taxes. So these are all the ways you can file your taxes.
Vishvajit, धन्यवाद. It's such an engaging session. ऐसे मालूम पड़ता है, not just conversation that आप और मैं कर रहे हो, but just from the number of questions and involvement that have come about, mostly आपकी टीम ने answer किया है already. But if there are any other questions that are unanswered, maybe you get to hear from the team at Quicko, or you can go and check out their website and app as well. But Vishwajit, once again, pleasure talking to you. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद and all the very best.
Absolutely, Kushal. Thanks for hosting me here, and I hope we were able to unlock the value that we promised. Cheers.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and to all our viewers at 5paisa, देखने के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.